Hello and good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, a deep dive into 2019 immigration trends. Hope everyone is having a great day today, and we're very excited for this presentation, so we can't wait to show you everything that we have. Before we get to that, all the good stuff though, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to download the recording after today's live session. If you have a question throughout today's presentation, we encourage you to ask that question. You can do so using the GoToWebinar control panel that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll try to get to that question after the main presentation. All right, so for those unfamiliar with Envoy, for nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, confusing, and frustrating immigration process. Envoy combines expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in 150 plus countries, has grown 46% year to date, and works with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. All right, I'm very, very excited to introduce today's main presenters, Richard Burke, Envoy Globo's CEO, and Manu Sivanandam, Envoy Globo's COO. Manu, thank you so much for joining us today. Just for everyone on the line, our CEO, Richard Burke, is currently doing an interview with NPR about this report, and he will join us as soon as that interview is over. So if you don't hear his voice for a couple minutes, that's why. Manu, before we hand off things off to you, just kind of want to walk our attendees through our agenda. Taking a look at our screen, we broke down the presentation into our main points from the report. So kind of a brief overview, starting with just a brief intro on the survey methodology, moving forward, demand for foreign talent, government policy, immigration process, green card sponsorship, Canada and global immigration, and then wrapping things up with data security. All right, so talking briefly about our survey methodology. There was a national survey conducted by the Harris Poll from November 27th to December 17th of 2018. Surveyed 405 HR professionals and hiring managers that belong to a variety of industries and company sizes. And of those 405 professionals surveyed, 208 were hiring managers and 197 were HR professionals. Additionally, 45% of the companies surveyed are public and 48% are private, and an additional 7% are a government agency. All right, so now let's jump into the meat of the presentation, starting with the demand for foreign talent. Manu, I'm going to have you take it from here.
Great, thank you, Eric, and welcome again to everyone to today's webinar on our 2019 Immigration Trends Report. And just for those of you for whom this is new, this is actually the 4th annual report we've done. So we started this report in 2016, and we launched this report to really help provide HR leaders and global mobility professionals and others interested in high-skilled immigration with a pulse check on how HR professionals and hiring managers are viewing the global talent mobility and immigration landscape. And so having the 4 years of data, and you'll see as we go through these charts, gives us a really good set of trended analysis that we'll be sharing as we go through this webinar. And as you heard Eric mention just now, we're thrilled also. We launched the report officially yesterday. We're thrilled that we've already got some terrific traction, and you may well have seen it featured in Forbes, TechCrunch, Recode already, and hopefully more to come. So with that, I'm going to actually sort of hand over to our CEO, Dick Burke, who's going to walk through the first two sections, starting off with this section that we have in front of us, the demand for foreign talent.
Thank you, Manu, and good afternoon. Delighted you can join us today. we're quite excited. This is our fourth trend survey, and obviously very, very timely time for it. So drawing your attention to page 8, first question was, looking forward, do you expect your company's foreign national headcount to increase or decrease? And we were frankly quite interested to see the answer to this question. You would suspect macroeconomic conditions, 2.1% unemployment for those with college degrees, negative unemployment for those with STEM degrees, 7.3 million unfilled positions nationally, according to the Department of Labor, with only 6.3 million looking for jobs. We thought that would push towards higher demand for foreign nationals. Countervailing it, though, was clearly the dramatic increase in complexity, uncertainty, and challenges coming from the administration. We know that case denials are up 4x from 6% to 24%. We also know that RFEs are up 2x from 28% to 60%. And we're very interested to see how those macroeconomic employment market challenges would balance against the heightened enforcement and uncertainty. And you can see 80% still feel that their foreign national population will either increase or stay the same. However, it's noteworthy that that is a slight decrease from 85% last year. And you can see that those who are certain that it'll increase went down 7 percentage points from 53 to 46. While that sounds a bit gloomy, it is worth noting that it's almost a 3-to-1 margin of folks who expect an increase relative to a decrease. Our next question was closely related and said, in this labor market, how important is sourcing foreign national employees to your TA strategy? And the headline here is, number one, it is still quite important. I think that's because of the state of the labor markets in the United States. So still quite important. 95% said either somewhat very or extremely important, higher than in prior years. What's noteworthy, however, though, is I think the pull of the uncertainty and increased enforcement actions. You can see that reflected in those who said it's going to be extremely important. Whereas last year it was 34%, we saw 40% decrease from 34% saying that to only 20% saying that this year. It'll be interesting to see what next year brings as these two competing forces, a tight labor market and heightened scrutiny, uncertainty, and enforcement play out against each other. The next slide, figure 3, attempted to discern what is the source of or reason for growth in your inbound immigration work. Historically, companies will say really the base is to get great talent or to retain great talent, so either acquisition or retention. Not surprisingly, we saw that here with 67% of respondents, about 400 respondents, almost equally split between publicly traded companies and private, saying to us that one of those two impetuses, acquisition or retention, drove their immigration policy. The remaining, close to a third, sought the diversity of opinion, experience, breadth, geographic experience that foreign nationals can bring. Figure 4 on the next slide is perhaps one of the most telling or illustrative slides in terms of capturing, I think, the current temperature immigration climate. This chart sought to determine, has your company's application process become more difficult, less difficult, or remained about the same? And you can see in 2017, which was based on questions in 2016, still in the Obama administration, almost evenly split between more difficult, less difficult, almost a coin toss. Fast forward now a few years into the current administration, which has seen those 4x increase in denials, 2x increase in RFEs, dramatic increase as well in audits and site visits. Now by almost a ratio of 2.5 to 1, folks are saying it's become more difficult. In particular, 47% saying it's become more difficult, the process for us, whereas only 18% say it has become less difficult. And with 1,000+ different customers that we served last year, thankful to serve more this year, that is one recurring refrain, is that interesting that in a presidential administration who's been generally pro-business, generally a more relaxed regulatory scheme, why the heightened scheme here, particularly in the context of the labor and employment market? So that conflict came out very, very clearly here on Figure 4. The last slide of this section was regarding RFE issuances, and I've already shared with you the national rates. And this answer surprised us a bit. We anticipated, based on available government data, to see a increase, the light blue line at the top, to continue its upward trajectory. Here it's settled back down a bit. We know nationally that in 2016, the case approval, the RFE issuance rate was 28%. A year later, in 17, it went to 46%. Now 60%. We were a bit surprised to see that decline. So that one is one where the survey data, obviously statistically reliable and significant, contrast a bit with the USCIS data regarding Q4 RFE rates. So turning next to government policy, I'll do the next two slides before handing it back to Manu. We wanted to get a sense of what recommendations, suggestions did people have regarding the government's hand in the immigration process, and Figure 6 is the first of those. The question was, how does the system impact your company's hiring or retention strategies? And while you see a number of different answers here, many fall into one of two buckets. Either it has added more costs, and or it has caused them to generate less revenue because of projects being delayed or projects being canceled. The constant is more uncertainty. So as you parse through these, you could easily sort them into, it's adding more costs, or it's costing us revenue, seemingly incongruous with the objectives of buy American, hire American. The one statistic that jumped off the page here to us on Figure 6 is, draw your attention to the middle row on the right-hand column. We're relocating work overseas. You saw in 2 prior years, about 1/5 of all respondents were saying, hey, it's gotten so bad, we're moving work overseas. We were a bit surprised to see the decline to 13%, which is a very meaningful decline. And again, that surprised us. We are the 1,000+ customers we have are experiencing something much different. Our global practice growing considerably and meaningfully, and so that one surprised us a bit because of the growth we're seeing in our global business. Last slide, Figure 7, regarding government. What would you like the government to change in the current system? Now, truth be told, we could fill these answers. It would take a jumbotron to list all the answers. They are many, many, many suggestions, if not grievances. But boiling them down, the two that came through most quickly was, interestingly, faster adjudication and more transparency regarding adjudication. Interestingly, in the top 5, only one sought a substantive change, and that was the one listed at the bottom, to increase the annual allotment of green cards. A couple rows further, if we had the jumbotron out for this Figure 7, would be to increase the allotment of H-1Bs. Astute observers recall that from 2001 through 2003, a time of a less challenging employment market, the H-1B cap number was 195,000. So the top 5 responses, though, fall into the bucket of either faster processing or more transparency regarding adjudication. Our takeaway from this is that you cannot control what the government does, so it is all the more inherent and incumbent upon you to control what you can control, namely your own processes. And what can you do to provide more speed and more transparency? And we believe the most successful employers, those most successful at navigating the immigration landscape, are going to be those that through their own policies and through their choice of vendor are most focused on a prompt, professional, and as transparent as possible process. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Manu, who will pick up at figure 8.
Great. Thank you very much, Dick. So we've talked about so far, Dick's gone through what we're seeing in terms of demand for foreign talent and how our respondents think about current government policy. In this next section on the immigration process, what we're going to dig into here is the current inefficiencies that many employers experience in how they manage their current immigration program or process. And obviously the impact of these inefficiencies is very real. It's not just the cost and the time, but also on employee experience. And we know obviously in this time of heightened foreign national anxiety, employee experience is an increasingly critical factor. So what I'm going to walk through the next 3 slides or next 3 charts are, first of all, what are the reasons that employers even think about evaluating an immigration program? What drives them to think about a change? Secondly, we'll then look at what are the current pain points that employers find in the immigration process. And then finally, we'll dig into how does this impact how they evaluate and decide upon what program they'd like to put in place. So on this slide here on figure 8, we asked in our survey, what's the reason that prompts you to evaluate your immigration program? And perhaps unsurprisingly, the number one reason is cost. They're at 50% on the left-hand sidebar. But what struck us as particularly interesting really was actually the next bar along at 47%, so just slightly lower, which was awareness of new and better ways of handling the immigration process. And what it struck us as sort of indicating that more and more employers are recognizing that there are actually new ways of managing the immigration process. There is innovation, and that could be something that might be of benefit to their organization. So we thought that was very interesting to see that coming in sort of second place, if you will, on this chart. We then, as I mentioned earlier, asked our survey participants, what's the biggest pain point you experience in the US immigration application process? And what we saw, and this is consistent with what we saw last year as well, is the top 2 reasons there. So the biggest reason is uncertainty of outcome, and that's become a slight increase to 39% of respondents selected this versus 35% last year. And then inefficiency, whether that's too much money or too much time, again, very close behind at 36%, and a slight increase as well from last year. Interestingly, if you look at the bottom 2 respondents on the left-hand side there, you see those pain points that really relate to what I mentioned earlier around the employee experience. So gathering foreign national information and documents. Clearly, many employers find that part of the process particularly challenging, collecting all those documents in an organized and sort of system-driven way. And then, of course, there foreign national anxiety. Given all the media coverage and given all the various issues, clearly that's a key issue, and that's something now that's really surfacing up to HR leaders and to hiring managers, and is now becoming an emerging key pain point in their overall immigration application process. So if those are the pain points, on the next slide, we'll look at how does that impact how HR professionals and hiring managers are thinking about how they evaluate their current immigration services provider. And so the question we asked was just that. We asked, what criteria do you use to evaluate your immigration services provider? And of course, respondents could select more than one answer here. And interestingly, we were surprised to see here that actually, unsurprisingly, of course, experience of the legal team is, of course, critical. But interestingly, very close behind in importance is response time and employee experience. So really reflecting, I think, what we saw on the earlier chart there. And those are the two bars on the right-hand side. So that section provided a snapshot of the questions we asked employers around the inefficiencies they find in the current immigration process. What are the pain points they see, and how is that impacting how they evaluate their immigration services and their overall process? In this next section, we'll shift into green card sponsorship. We know, of course, that this is a critical path for many foreign nationals, and we asked employers a question actually that we've asked consistently over the last over our previous 4 surveys. We'll dig into first of all what percentage of employers do actually provide green card sponsorship. We'll then look into when that's provided during the employer's tenure, and finally we'll look into what level of cost is typically covered by employers. So in this first slide, you'll see here that actually 2/3 of employers do sponsor foreign nationals for permanent residence. And if I jump very quickly to the next slide, which segues straight off that, of the companies that do sponsor foreign nationals for a green card, 2/3 start within the first year of service. And that's actually held relatively constant over the last 4 years. If you look at that, it was sort of gone from 71 to 66 to 61 and now to 66%. So pretty constant. And what we find actually when we dig deeper into the numbers is that there's actually a sizable portion who provide it very early on within that first year of service. And part of that, of course, I think we suspect reflects the environment around employee anxiety. And part of it, of course, reflects the need around having a competitive immigration policy when recruiting foreign talent. So finally, on the green card side of things, we then asked employers, what portion of the cost do you cover for your employees? And what you'll see here is the overwhelming majority, 80%, actually cover all of the costs for the employee. And while that's dipped a little bit from prior years, it's in a pretty similar zip code. 80% this year, 87% last year, and 84% in 2017. And if we look a little bit deeper at that, and we sort of break down the group of employers who do cover all those costs, of that 80%, 49 percentage points of that 80% actually pay for all of the green card related fees, but with a contractual stipulation. So some form of a payback stipulation there is what the almost half of employers are providing. So that covers our survey results on green cards and the immigration process. We're going to shift gear a little bit outside of US immigration and onto Canada and global immigration. So by way of context, in 2017, Toronto actually created more tech jobs than the Bay Area, Seattle, and DC combined, according to a recent CBRE report. I mean, Canada, for those who are less familiar with its immigration policy, has a very publicly stated pro-high skilled immigration policy. It's actually got a stated goal of bringing in 350,000 foreign nationals a year between now and 2021. And it's not just Toronto, actually. Even in Ottawa, there are something like over 1,700 tech companies. And that change in immigration policy and the sort of public sentiment around it in Toronto is actually reflected in some of the employer sentiment that you'll see in the next couple of slides as we talk about Canada. So on this first slide on the left-hand side on figure 15, you'll see that 2/3 of our 405 respondents do view Canada as having a more favorable immigration policy for employers than the US. So a pretty significant majority there. And I think that reflects many of the points I mentioned just now around Canada's public statements to that effect. If we look on the right-hand side on figure 16, you'll see that almost 40%, so 38% there, are now actively considering Canada for their company's expansion. And actually 21%, a fifth of our survey respondents, already have at least one office in Canada. And where I think that really materializes itself is in the next exhibit here we have on figure 17, where we asked employers, are you now sending more people to and or hiring more foreign nationals in Canada? And here you can see that actually 2/3 of employers are actively investing in increasing their foreign national hiring in Canada. And that might be because they are sending more people from the US into Canada, or they are directly hiring more foreign nationals in Canada. But ultimately, what this reflects here is a real sort of boom, if you will, for high-skilled immigrants in Canada, as Canada seeks to step up, in particular, its tech sector. So very interesting findings there on Canada. So if we expand and go even more global, and we asked employers more broadly, how do you expect the demand for global assignments, whether it's work permits, employment visas, and so on, do you expect that to increase, decrease, or remain the same during the next year? And you'll see that almost half of respondents in our survey this year, so 48%, expect their demand for global assignments, which we defined here as non-US, to somewhat increase or to significantly increase. Now, that is actually a decrease from prior years, and in the prior 2 years, it had been closer to 60%, had said the same. But I think, interestingly here, the proportion who expect it to increase is still significantly higher than those who expect to decrease. It's that 48% compared to the 17%. So it's almost 3 times as high as those who would be shrinking, with a large portion, almost 1/3, expecting it to remain the same. So global immigration clearly remains an important part of many companies' overall sort of talent management strategy. We then asked employers, given that landscape, what are some of the challenges that you see when it comes to global or outbound immigration? And so in this figure, in figure 20, you'll see here the answer to that question. And so at the top there is, for this year's survey, is the differing regulations in each country. So clearly the global complexity there coming into play. But you also see very similar challenges with US immigration. So for example, the second item there on maintaining accurate records. So this challenge around managing documentation, managing the various kind of compliance requirements been a real challenge. And if you look on the very far bottom right-hand side, one perhaps point worth calling out there, we've called it out there as a 3-year low, is the percentage of respondents who selected that they don't have any challenges surrounding compliance is now at a 3-year low. And so if you look back, it was almost 1/3 actually of respondents said in 2017 that they don't have any challenges surrounding compliance, but now only 9% say the same. And that clearly reflects the increasing complexity of the global immigration environment that's affecting more and more companies. So in this final section, before we turn over to Q&A, we asked participants in the survey about data security, recognizing how critical this is, especially, for example, with GDPR coming into play in the EU. We wanted to get a sense for how confident the companies feel in their current company's immigration data security, and what are some of the actions they're taking to improve data security. So we found a very significant decrease here in the level of confidence that employers have in their company's immigration data. So when we asked respondents, how confident are you in the level of security of the transmission and storage of your company's employees' personal immigration data between your systems and immigration provider? Last year, almost 60%, so 59% were very confident in that data security, but this year only 46% said the same. So it would appear that there is perhaps a decline there in how confident employees feel about their company's data security when it comes to immigration data. And this, of course, we know is critical just given the nature of immigration data and the nature of the personal documentation that's often required is often flowing from a company to their immigration services provider. So we then asked employers, well, what are you doing about it? What are some of the measures that you're taking to improve your data security, given some of the concerns, both here in the US, but also around the world, as I mentioned, with some of the compliance laws like GDPR coming into play. And on the top left there, as you can see, almost half, so 49% of employers are actively making investments to increase data security, which I think is good news. But what we also found, which did surprise us and I think is a real cause for concern, is just underneath that on the bottom left, only 13% of respondents are actually requiring their immigration partners to increase their security and become compliant with local laws like GDPR. So a very small fraction of respondents are actually imposing those requirements upon their immigration services providers, who of course are custodians of this very sensitive data and involved in the transfer of that information. So that concludes our sort of walkthrough of a snapshot of the data and the information we have from this year's Immigration Trends Report. And hopefully you'll have a copy, you'll receive a copy of the full report yourself. And if you haven't, you'll be able to download that from our website. There's a lot more information than we've had time to go through in today's session. We also recognize now, if that was one perhaps kind of prevailing final thought, I think we would say that what we have observed, and this is both from the survey and also from our experience with across our customer base, is foreign talent and the essential role it plays given the labor market today and the STEM gap shortage is now really top of mind, not just for HR teams, but also for C-level executives and boards. And so this really is a critical area. We very much hope that this report is of use to all of you and others in your organization. We also have the ability to slice this report in more detail, and so please do reach out to us if there's any further information we can provide you with, if there's particular information that would be of help. And so with that, I think we'll turn over to Q&A.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the top of the hour, well, first, Manu, DB, thank you so much for walking our audience through the various figures and charts that we had. Before we get to Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that you can add, if you have a question, please do so, ask that question using the GoToWebinar function that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. So while we wait for some of those questions to roll in, just want to remind our attendees that we have a couple more webinars coming up. Next Thursday is going to be a kind of like a last-second look at Brexit. As for those that know, Brexit is supposed to happen March 29th. But no one really knows what's going to happen at that point yet. So stay tuned for that. We'll be joined by Stephanie Lewin, Envoy's head of global immigration, and she walks us through the latest developments. And then Wednesday, April 3rd, we're going to have another global webinar comparing friendly immigration policy changes with exclusionary policies. So as Manu mentioned, that this report, if you would like to receive it, please visit us at trends.envoyglobal.com to download your copy. And while you're there, also be sure to subscribe to our mailing list so that when future reports and white papers and other great content pieces come out, you'll be the first to receive those. And then for everyone who is currently in attendance, if you take a look at your screen, we are offering SHRM and HRCI credits. So please take a second to copy those down. These will also be included in tomorrow's follow-up email. All right, so let's turn it over to questions, and we already have some coming in. Manu, you mentioned that you're able to kind of take the data and break it down. Are you able to, do you have this data available by geography?
I think in some instances we may be able to. It depends a little bit on the sample size. So with the results, as you slice too thinly, you can risk the data not being sort of statistically significant. But definitely, if that is something you're interested in, please do reach out to us. We also have other benchmarking data from our data science team that I think many have found useful around just benchmarking immigration programs that we're very happy to help provide you with. If you're wondering about how does your program stack up against others, we're very happy to help you with that as well.
Great. And I'll leave this one open for both of you. So why has companies' confidence in data security gone down from last year to this year?
This is Dick. As Manu said, that answer surprised us a bit. We hope that it's not folks being asleep at the switch or saying, oh, it'll never happen to me. Barely a week goes by where you don't hear of some company impacted by a data breach. So we hope it's not complacency, but I don't know what else to attribute it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe just building on that, I think clearly, some of it may actually also be a positive, which may just be the increased awareness of the need for data security for immigration data, with initiatives like GDPR taking place, and as Dick referenced, just a continued increase in data security breaches. And we recognize at Envoy, and when we think about our own services and our own technology platform, we recognize that this is absolutely critical, because and I've gone through this process myself, actually personally, having gone through the H-1B process and the green card process. The nature of the documents that you're providing and the nature of the information that's going back and forth often between companies and the immigration services provider tend to be highly sensitive. And so ensuring that's done in a very secure environment, I think, is really critical, and if not, I think can be a real weakness in terms of the data security risk to your company.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Looking at our list here, do you have a breakdown of what types of companies filled out the survey that we just talked about?
Yes, we do. So if you, in the immigration report, if you download it, you'll see at towards the end, we have what we call kind of firmographics, and that gives you a breakdown of the types of companies. As Eric mentioned, sort of near the top of the hour, about half the companies are public companies, about half are private. It's a range of company sizes. It's a wide range of industries. But if you look at, it's actually, to be specific, it's for the pages 31, 32, and 33 in the immigration trends report. You'll find very detailed breakdowns by industry, company size, company employees, job titles, etc., of survey respondents. We're actually thrilled to do this survey with, as I think as Eric referenced, with the Harris poll. The Harris poll is for those who are not familiar with it, is a major global consulting and market research firm that's been around for over 50 years and specializes in running these types of market research and reports.
Great. Just give us a few seconds here as we parse over some of the questions that came in.
Yeah, so one of the questions here is there any talk about submitting immigration cases online rather than paper documents? In our survey, we didn't ask that question specifically. I think certainly I would say from a company perspective, we know that many of our customers, of course, really value the ability to manage the process online versus have documents and paper sort of flying around back and forth. And of course, for those, many of you will be aware that the USCIS has announced that it intends to move towards some form of online registration for next year's cap season, so we may see that gradual shift. And certainly some of the global markets we work with, actually, it is quite standard for cases to be submitted online rather than paper documents. That may well be an increasing trend that we see. Great. Okay. And another question we have here is, are companies starting green cards at hire or waiting a year at least? And I think so great question. So in the data that we shared, I think we highlighted that. I'm just trying to pull up the information here in front of me.
I believe it may be figure 13.
Yeah, so great, thank you. So we highlighted that 2/3 of employers are starting the green card within the first year of service. I would say a very sizable portion, and we see this especially with tech companies, start very close to at hire, and they do so, I think, mostly for competitive talent reasons. Anything you would add to?
I think that's exactly right. It's one of the areas where a employer can distinguish itself relative to its peers, particularly relevant and germane in the time of heightened anxiety and uncertainty. Green cards are rightly perceived as higher ground, and that's all I'd add.
Great. All right, well, we're going to end things there, give everyone back about 15 minutes of their day. Thank you so much for joining us. If you did not receive a copy of this survey, again, please head to trends.envoyglobal.com to download yours and read over it. There's a ton of more great information in there that we encourage you to look at. And then this recording and the slide deck will be sent out to everyone tomorrow. So please keep an eye out on your email inbox for that. Thank you, Manu DV, for the presentation today, and hope everyone currently listening has a great rest of their day.